Hello there, endurance nerds. You'll notice that I'm not in my usual digs today, so there will be no introduction from the illustrious Kitten or Teddy.
Horror.
I know. Let me know in the comments down below how dissatisfied you are. Click away from the video right now because the stars of the show are not going to be here today. But for those of you who want to stick around, let's go through a bit of a travel vlog today, shall we? Now, for those of you who have been around for a little while, you may have seen the video I made a couple of months ago talking about a transition in job roles. So at the end of 2023, I moved into a role that's going to require a substantial amount of travel. And over the past several months, I've been enduring that travel and trying to get used to the routines of just maintaining some semblance of normalcy in my life and the ever important maintaining balance and training. And it has been a bit of a struggle, but I am coming into my own and I'm developing some new habits and routines that are going to be helpful, especially as I go into the in-season. And I think I've finally put the final piece into the puzzle on this trip here, and I want to share a little bit of my routine and some of the things I figured out. Now, the first thing to note is that travel can be very exhausting. It does certainly take a lot out of me. It's pretty rough, and it starts right from day one. So typically speaking, my travel days are going to start on maybe a Monday or Tuesday of a given week, and it can last anywhere between 1 and 4 days. So usually I am home by Thursday night, but it does start typically pretty early on Monday or Tuesday mornings. I might be waking up at 5 o'clock in the morning, getting myself ready, getting to the airport, and getting on a flight by 7 o'clock in the morning. Now, that's not the earliest of all flight times, but considering that you're doing potentially anywhere between 3 and 6 hours worth of travel and still working when you get to your destination, and a time change notwithstanding, it can be pretty difficult. So on this particular trip, I left on a Tuesday morning, was out of the house by 6 o'clock a.m., got to the airport at 6:30. I have clear and TSA pre-check, and the Buffalo International Airport is pretty quiet and pretty uncomplicated in the morning. It's pretty uncomplicated in general, but I was able to get in and get myself starting to board by 6:25 in the morning. I don't necessarily recommend people cut it that close with timing, but considering how early my flight is and how predictable Buffalo Airport is, I was able to pretty much get there, give myself 25 minutes to get through security, get myself boarded at 6:25 for a 7 a.m. takeoff. Now, my flight landed at 8 o'clock Central Time at the O'Hare International Airport. Now, that means I'm repeating an hour. For those of you aware, I'm going from East Coast time to Central Time, so I have another extra hour in my workday. At which point, I picked up my rental car, navigated my way through that airport all by myself, so good for me, thank you very much. And then I moved over to the Crest Hill area, which is a suburb of Chicago, which took about 45 minutes to get to this area. And then I worked from about 9 o'clock a.m. there until 5 o'clock. My team came in and met me at the site. But basically, I've looked at roughly a 12-hour workday between travel and true work. Generally, we stay in a hotel that's somewhere within 10 minutes of our working location to keep things pretty easy and convenient for us. And we typically have team meals together. So our lunches are done together as well as our dinners. It's a great way to do some team building, to get to know one another, to talk about work things or non-work things. But as you wouldn't have at home, it kind of monopolizes some of your discretionary time. Now, usually on that first day, we'll come in and then we'll get back to the hotel and we'll take about an hour before we meet up for dinner. So if we get back to the hotel around 5:15, we're meeting by 6:15. And I usually use that time on the first day to get myself unpacked, iron my clothes that are terribly wrinkled because of the fact that I'm a chronic overpacker, because I want to cram all my clothes in there so I can get more shit that I don't need into my carry-on suitcase, because I'm not going to check a bag. Thank you very much. But then we meet downstairs in the lobby and we go to dinner together, which I enjoy, and that takes anywhere between an hour and an hour and a half, after which point is my opportunity to continue training. Now, here's where I've had a little bit of a struggle in terms of training. There's generally a fitness area available, and as the weather gets nicer, being able to go outside for a run or something like that after the working hours and sunsetting around 9 o'clock p.m., that's actually going to be pretty easy, but it hasn't quite been that way yet because it's still only April. But the trouble with the fitness center is that you are still limited on equipment, so you lose a little bit of fidelity, especially if you're trying to do some more structured training when it comes to endurance sport. Right? There's a difference between exercise and training. And what I've been doing when I've been away for the past several trips is really just exercise. It's just maintaining the cardiovascular system, making sure that I'm not losing a ton of fitness, but I don't feel it's been moving the needle productively forward. And as I'm moving into the more in season, and if I decide I want to sign up for some events of some sort, I don't feel like I'm moving my fitness in a direction that I want to. I feel like I'm just treading water and maintaining things in a serviceable capacity. And the biggest struggle really has been the bike, because a treadmill is a treadmill. I can get downstairs and run on a treadmill. Granted, I usually struggle for anything over an hour indoors, especially in an environment that's not the best ventilated with fans, and you're usually staring at a wall, but I usually can get myself to do 45 minutes or an hour downstairs on the treadmill. It's not really a one-for-one replacement for what I do at home. Bike, The bike has been the real challenge. And I know that fitness centers usually have some kind of recumbent or spin bike of sorts, but I haven't been using them. And the primary reason is because I can't capture my data. And that trope surrounding endurance athletes not wanting to do sports that don't record their data because it's not on Strava, it didn't happen. That's really not the reason. It's not about the hubris or the social element. It's actually about the data and what I do with that data. If it's one-off here or there, I don't mind doing training that I can't capture with my watch or some other device. But when it's a more consistent part of my routine, I do have a problem with that. I don't want to just miss 3 or 4 days worth of training once or twice every single month, because then you start to lose a lot of that information. And it's really tough to capture any of that information from the bike when you're used to using power at home and you're limited to heart rate out on the road. Now, all of my hotels so far have had fitness centers with spin bikes, specifically Pelotons in them. But I can't just pair these up with my watch or my Zwift account. They don't really carry a signal like traditional Bluetooth transmitters do. The only option there would be to have a Peloton account. I don't really feel keen on paying for some sort of subscription when I'm not going to be using the bulk of the Peloton app at all. I just want the data. And the only other option would be to use a real bike, whether I bring my own or I rent something, but that tends to be a lot of friction. It's pretty cost prohibitive to transport your bike or even rent a bike. Not to mention the time schedules are a little bit tight to be able to make sure I'm putting a bike together or being able to pick one up and drop one off. So I came up with a solution that I'm going to be using. I tested it out yesterday. I brought my own source of power and, of course, my own pedals. So knowing that spin bikes traditionally have that 15 millimeter spindle that you can take off with a traditional wrench, I was able to bring these pedals with me, put them on the Peloton bike downstairs, and then calibrate them, and I was able to actually get a pretty serviceable ride through Zwift. Now, I'm not going to say it was my favorite experience because I'm not really keen on the feel of spin bikes. They just have a different resistance curve. It feels a little bit, it kind of feels like a fixie where it's pushing that power back through the pedals when you start to slow down your spin rate. And I get it. It's meant for a different use case. It's not going to be the exact same experience that I have at home on my indoor trainer or, of course, outdoors. But I was able to get a pretty decent ride in, and the power numbers were pretty close to accurate in my opinion. They matched my heart rate. It did feel a little bit more fatiguing in areas that I'm not used to engaging quite as heavily because it just uses a different part of my musculature, namely my glutes and a lot of my lower legs. I guess as an unintended consequence, you could absolutely do worse than using different muscle systems. Now, I'm not going to go seek this out on my own at home. I'd rather just use strength work for that, but it worked out pretty well. Now, for my routine, I am making my first day of travel a default recovery day. It just gives me that optionality to decompress. If I want to take a whole rest day, I can, especially after a long day of travel. If there's any complications, I usually don't like taking full rest, but I have the option to do that. So when I set everything up yesterday, I figured I'd do a 30-minute recovery-ish ride and also give myself the extra time to just make sure that I knew how to set everything up. And it took me a total of maybe 6 or 7 minutes to get the pedals put on the bike and to get the saddle and everything adjusted. I was really unfamiliar with the spin bike, but if I go down and do that again here in my workout in a few minutes, it should take me no more than 2 to 3 minutes. I can see in the future that I wouldn't mind doing this for sustained efforts, probably mostly endurance, but maybe some tempo and even threshold work. But I can't see myself using this option for high intensity interval sets, which seems kind of counterintuitive considering that's the bread and butter of spin bikes. But I'm just not familiar enough with the nuance of turning the knob and that type of muscle memory to feel like I wouldn't be distracted and it wouldn't take away from my workout, especially if I'm trying to dial in just that right power with just the right cadence. But I'm certainly going to use this as a serviceable solution when I'm looking for those sustained efforts that the spin bike can definitely provide. A couple things to note if this is something that you're going to try out for yourself. First is make sure that you're walking into a fitness center that has an available and working spin bike. I usually go onto the website and look at the fitness center anyway. It usually shows some pictures because it's a primary selling feature of most hotels because fitness is important to a lot of people traveling for leisure and for business. And I can see if there's a spin bike available there. The distinction you need to make is between fitness bike and a spin bike. The primary distinction between a spin bike and a fitness bike is that a spin bike will have that interchangeability in the pedals, whereas a fitness bike, the commercial ones that you see in a lot of gyms that might be a recumbent style, something with just a very simple digital framework, those are likely not going to have interchangeable pedals for you. I'm not saying it's impossible. In fact, the gym downstairs does look like it has a 15 millimeter hex spindle around the outside. However, trying to loosen those up just out of curiosity, I was not able to get either one of those pedals off. The second thing to consider is to make sure that you're familiar with how to take off pedals and put them back on. Many people first starting out assume righty-tighty, lefty-loosey, which is not the case for both sides of your bike. For the drive side, that is in fact correct. The non-drive side, or the left-hand side of your bike when you're standing over the top of it, is not going to follow that paradigm because the spindles are threaded such that they continue to tighten as the pedal stroke moves forward. That's for safety reasons, right? You don't want to be in a sprint as over the course of weeks and months, your pedal may have loosened in that counterclockwise direction over time, and then you can really get seriously hurt or killed. So you are going to use the opposite mechanism on the left-hand side of the bike, which is to basically righty-loosey, lefty-tighty. The third thing you need to consider is ensuring that you have that 15mm wrench available to you. So the pedals on the spin bike are going to have the 15mm spindle. They usually do not have the Allen key removal option, so you need to make sure that you have a wrench with you. And a lot of interchangeable power pedals that you'll have at home will use that same configuration or have the both and configuration with the wrench option as well as the Allen key. Now make sure if you travel carry-on only like I do that you're not bringing your full park tool pedal wrench that could be 12 to 14 inches long. Always check the TSA guidelines, but at the time of making this video, your hand tools are limited to being 7 inches or less in total length while fully extended. So if you have a folding tool, an assembled tool, they cannot exceed 7 inches, which most traditional pedal wrenches do. Don't try to get anything past the goalie with TSA. I'm going to guarantee that they're going to see that thing light up like a Christmas tree on their scanner, and they're going to take it away. And those wrenches are expensive. So just use something simple. I had a spare from like an old set that I had laying around. I brought this with me in case I lose it or leave it in the gym or something. I'm not out of ton of money, and it's something I could potentially replace just going down to the local Target or Home Depot or what have you, and I could do it pretty inexpensively. The only thing I would recommend against with a smaller wrench is don't go for an adjustable wrench. Sometimes it could be difficult to tighten it up, and the clearance between the pedal body and the crank arm might be a little bit difficult with a thicker wrench with that spindle in there to tighten it. So just use something that's a modest size so that you can fit it in there and get it off adequately. You might have to put a little bit of torque into the wrench. I know it's a little tougher with the shorter one, but I don't usually have a problem if I can situate myself so I can push the pedal in the forward direction with my foot and then pull in the opposite direction so I can get it loosened. It took me a little bit of effort, but I didn't have to torque on it that long. I didn't feel like I needed any additional leverage, and I don't have massive amounts of upper body strength, so most people won't have a problem there. But I was able to get everything tied in with Zwift, had a pretty successful ride, and I feel much more comfortable now having that experiment under my belt, doing that for tonight's workout that I'm going to be doing here soon. Today's routine was very similar to yesterday, minus the travel. I got up at 6 o'clock in the morning. They do have complimentary breakfast offered downstairs, so after kind of meandering around the hotel room, getting myself ready for the morning, I ran downstairs. I grabbed an English muffin with some jelly and a banana. I don't usually eat breakfast that early in the morning, but because of the uncertainty of when we would be having lunch, I figured I'd have a little bit in terms of carbs on board to give me some energy to continue to go doing some work throughout the day, which is much needed in some cases. We left the site at 5 o'clock. We came back here. We had about 45 minutes after commuting to have to ourselves and get ourselves settled in. And then we met downstairs again at 6 o'clock p.m. for dinner. We finished up and got back to the hotel by about 7:30, and that brings us to right now. I'm going to do another workout on the bike with a much quicker assembly and transition time to get myself on the workout. And I'm going to add a part of my routine that I do on the last night of travel most of the time, and that's to do a load of laundry before I leave. So any of the work clothes that I've worn, any of the night clothes or workout clothes that I've worn, I do a quick load of laundry while I'm doing my workout, so I have limited dirty clothes that I'm bringing home with me. So I'll take my workout clothes and whatever I wear to go to sleep tonight, I'll put them in a plastic bag, seal them up, and I'll put them in the suitcase. But it's a lot easier to deal with less of that dirty laundry in terms of managing any type of smell in your suitcase and just not having to go home from work and worrying about having to do a bunch of extra chores. Most of my clothes are clean. But I'm going to get at my workout tonight here, folks. I'm going to be off early again tomorrow morning, do a half day of work, and I'm going to be jumping on the plane. So I'm actually going to call it here. Please let me know what your tips and tricks are for when you travel and how you maintain some balance and some productivity when you're training, when you're out on the road for leisure or for business. Please hit all the buttons, all the things, all the stuff. Hit it for Teddy. He wasn't here today to do my intro. I know. We miss you, Teddy. I love Teddy. By the time you're watching this video, I'll be back with Teddy. And as always, I'll catch you in the next one. See ya.